How I became an artist is actually accidental. And I was going to follow my father's, like either medical in a doctor or follow my mother's step of being a dentist. So actually in Korea, you have to apply, you already have to decide what field you're going to go into when you go to the college. And my brother came in one day and persuaded me that you don't want to be a medical doctor or dentist, and you really going to be cool to be an artist. So without really knowing what art will be like, I went to art school. And I was actually not decided on what kind of really media I'll be majoring in. But eventually I fell into work with the clay. So I became a ceramic artist, and I went to UC Berkeley. Until then, my aim to be an artist was very vague. But once I was in UC Berkeley and became a graduate student, actually it was like 16 hours a day, like studio work. And it actually involving with a huge amount of like your time with the art makes me feel like that is something that I really wanted to do. And after I finished my graduate school, art became actually almost like my whole life. And so right now I cannot think of me as a separate person, just like not an artist. So art became just me, and me became an artist. My education in Korea was very conservative, actually contemporary European Bauhaus influenced art education. But when I arrived at UC Berkeley, the art scene over there was very funky and abstract expressionism. Almost everything that we thought about is the bad art was going on there. So that was the biggest shock of my life, and I felt like I don't belong to UC Berkeley scene. At the same time, I don't want to go back to work on the same thing I made it in Korea. So that is one of the more difficult time of my life, that I felt like I'm really lost in between two contradicting cultures and aesthetics. So actually, I was going to give up my art, but that actually was the best experience at the end, that I was doing a serious soul searching because I feel like I'm lost and I wanted to try to find out who I am. I think that is still a very valuable lesson as an artist that I learned as a graduate student. So I found out I cannot go back to what my education in Korea, but I cannot also follow through those funk art that was going on in Berkeley. Both of them are not in my blood. So I decided to, walk in the beaches and think about what I should do, what direction I should go, what kind of art pieces I wanted to make. Then I was thinking that, okay, maybe I should go back as like a childlike, starting anew. And then when I'm walking on a beach, I saw my footprint and I was making my handprint and all that. So I kind of started to make this sand dune series of work, which turned out to be started out the footprint, handprint, but then children playing in the sand, showing their hands and foot and hairs buried in the sand. So it's actually very childlike pieces, but somehow because I'm using body part, it could be macabre pieces. So people are thinking there are strange Eastern, West, funk art combined together. So somehow my piece was well received in art field, and I was invited to be a show in New York, and I got juried in Young American show and all that thing. That was actually a big surprise for me because it was more like a testing it out to be a child and trying to be who I am. And I found that I just should be true to myself and the person who got caught between two cultural differences. So that is who I am. My personal life influenced my art tremendously a lot. And after I graduated with my MFA degree at Berkeley, so I was so into making art 16 hours a day. I got married and had my first child, and I found out actually it's very difficult to work full-time with a little child. And as I got another set of twins, so now I have a 3 child, and that time became actually a lot more precious thing in my life. So I have a lot of ideas in my head, but I don't have a time to visualize that. So I start to do work that is two-dimensional. It's like an exercise of my drawing. And then I roll them up and fire it. Then you cannot see them as like a drawing anymore. So it's almost like hidden diaries inside rolled drawings. And then later on, about a year later, when I had a whole bunch of drawings, and I started to make them as like a stored drawing and just drawing laying on the tabletops and stuff like that. And the stored drawing series actually incorporate the time, how important time is. It exists in one form, one time, and exists the other form in the other time. So that piece, the series of those pieces are really important for me, kind of incorporating my life as an art and time as a kind of a precious commodity. I get bored working on the same series, especially if I became really good at that series. It's not a challenge anymore, so I have to move to the next series. So, for example, my Heart series in 1988 was related with my father-in-law passing away because of his heart failure. So there are a lot of humors I need at that time. So the Heart series is one of the very different than my typical art. It's a narrative, it's figurative, and it's funny and more like a joke in your life. I looked through my pieces and I found out I really don't have a lot of colors in my work. I'm not trained painters, so I feel like I have some fear of using certain colors, bright colors especially, so I wanted to deal with it. So, I started to use a lot of colors on my Broken Wall series, and then 1996, I was diagnosed with my breast cancer. So that breast cancer is one of that time you were thinking about death, of course, when you are diagnosed with cancer. So I was actually working on some piece that looked like almost like a top. So I kind of decided to use top as a metaphor for the frailty of my life. So, they turn really strongly, and one little snack, they just die down. So I made actually those spinning top series, and some of them became an installation, some of them became an installation on the floor or ceiling. I think that is one of my most strongest series of all, and I had a show in Korea. It is almost sold out at the time, so. And actually, the adversaries in your life can affect your artwork a lot. In a way, very positively. I think you can use adversaries of your life as a positive factors in your life. I think that's what I'm doing a lot. So having these difficulties in your life is not a really bad thing for an artist. Water and ice period also has some time sequences in it. Water became an ice. It became like vapors, and it became an ice again, kind of like a cyclical effect. And my husband and I traveled to Alaska, and we were landed on Alaska, ice field. And I wanted to actually make the ice and water as a series of my work, but water doesn't have a shape. So I was struggling with that series a long time before I even started it. And finally, I decided to incorporate the glass as a part of a water. So it has ceramics and glass together, and I started to work exclusively more on glass pieces. I think I worked on that series the longest, and I made a lot of installation with that, and working as a glass is a kind of new thing for me, so it gave me a lot of experimentation that I love to do. It's a challenge for me to figure it out, how I can use those two materials together. My more recent exhibition in Korea was about, it's just a history. My revolt against the Korean traditional part was so strong when I was young, But when I went back to Korea and visited the museum, I found it was like almost like visiting your grandparents, you know, very familiar, very close, and actually somehow have a root in there. So I started to make this series of these pieces that relate to the Korean celadon and white wares, which I call it It's Just a History. So it actually is very small. It's almost like in a history book that you're looking at these pieces. And I use my master thesis that I did, MFA thesis, about the Korean comparison of a Korean celadon and white wares. And I used them as a text behind it. And it became a series of my work for that. And I feel like I'm in peace with my tradition. My current series, Sending Writings, is actually incorporating my husband's poem and my so-called poem together. And so I made a lot of pieces using his writings as a decal and behind the series of work. And then I also did a lot of casting of his fruits that he cultivated in our grove. And so fruits and writings are together. And my writings sending out to the ocean and the rocks and together. So my real current pieces, I decided to make it like sort of a DNA-looking glass pieces as a wall installation. And actually that was very exciting because I haven't made entirely glass pieces for a long time. So I kind of decided on like 10 different firings, like huge amount of those glass DNA pieces, and writing his poems and my poems on top. So that is my most recent pieces now. While I was working on It's Just a History pieces, my husband got really sick and he passed away with cancer. And after he passed away, it was very difficult for me to work, and somehow I feel like the guy who helps me a lot, or at the time he's a worst critic of my work, is not there next to me. So I started to make actually detangled pieces, like a lot of like drawings that look like a tangled together. Then when you pass away, you become like your own tangle, just like leaving all the detangled messes behind you. So the detangled piece was actually very therapeutic pieces for me. And after that, I kind of looked through his poems, and then I said, is there any way I can incorporate his poems and also his love for the orchard and fruits together? So there are a lot of pieces I'm using his poem as a decal images behind his fruits and pile of fruits and things like that. But these new pieces I'm working on glass is entirely his writing and my writing together and making sort of like a DNA things. So I have an installation of big wall pieces done with a glass that called Poetic DNA. The real now pieces is called the flux pieces, which I'm using extruded like a noodle kind of work and with the bright colors coming out of the piece. This is something, it's more fun, and I think as I get older, I'm not worrying about how good my product is going to be or how other people are going to judge it, what kind of great piece I'm making. It's just like for me having so much fun, and I'm healthy enough that at my age I can be able to work in the studio. It kind of makes me free. So make something like a playful pieces and I call it a flux, which means I can go one way or the other way. I don't necessarily have a huge ideas what I'm going to do. And nobody's going to criticize me. And this old lady is still working in her studio. That's great. That's what I'm hearing all the time. So I'm actually most free period of my life. That's great. For me, as an artist, I think the most important thing is that my pieces have to satisfy me. I get a lot of pressure from galleries that your piece should be that certain period they sold really well, but I think I was somehow strong enough to resent that kind of request and make my own pieces what I need to make at that period of time. First of all, you have to be happy to work with your work. And second of all, you have to be happy your result. You're the one who has most, critique on your work. So important thing is don't try to make a piece to satisfy other people, because there might be a whole bunch of people who like your work. There might be a whole bunch of people who doesn't like your work. So as an artist, you have to satisfy yourself first. I hope next 10 years I'll be still healthy enough that I can work in the studio. And I think to me, working in a studio, I can forget about all the rest of the world. And I'm in my own world and spending hours in my studio, and I don't think that is such a bad thing for an old lady. And I think that if I can work in my studio another 10 more years, that will be a blessing for my life.